On the eve of May 29, 1453, a lone figure stood on the crumbling walls of a city that had once been the center of the world. He was Constantine XI, the last Roman emperor. Before him, stretching out as far as the eye could see, was the massive army of the Ottoman Sultan, Mehmed II. His city, Constantinople, was a ghost of its former self, a relic besieged by a new world of gunpowder and cannons. The emperor had barely 7,000 men to stand against an overwhelming force of over 80,000. For 1,000 years, an ancient prophecy had haunted the city. It foretold that just as a Constantine founded the city, a Constantine would see it fall. The emperor stared out at the sea of enemy campfires, a field of defiant stars against the encroaching dark. He knew what was coming. He could have fled, saved his own life, and lived out his days in exile. But to abandon his city, that was to abandon his very soul. This is the true story of how a dying empire's final desperate stand against impossible odds became an immortal legend. This is the last stand of Constantine XI. To understand the tragedy of Constantine II, you have to understand the world he was born into. By the mid-15th century, the Byzantine Empire, the glorious Eastern Roman Empire that had stood for over 1,000 years, was a shadow of its former self. Once a sprawling power that dominated the Mediterranean, it had been reduced to little more than Constantinople itself and a few scattered territories. The city that once boasted a population of nearly 500,000 was now home to perhaps 50,000 souls, its grand plazas and neighborhoods giving way to desolate, open fields all contained within its legendary but now aging walls. The empire was an island in a sea of enemies, chief among them the rising Ottoman Empire, a dynamic and expansionist power that had already conquered most of the surrounding lands. For decades, the Turks had eyed the great city, the last bastion of Christendom in the East, the final remnant of Roman glory. Into this precarious world stepped Constantine XI Last in 1449. He was the fourth son of Emperor Manuel II, known for his courage, his skill as a commander, and his profound sense of duty. He wasn't a ruler inheriting a thriving kingdom, he was inheriting a ruin, a sacred duty to protect a flame that was about to flicker out. By all accounts, he was a soldier first, a man of action now trapped in a desperate diplomatic struggle. He pleaded with the powers of Western Europe for aid. He appealed to the Pope in Rome, even agreeing to the deeply unpopular union of the Eastern Orthodox and Western Catholic churches to secure military support. But the great nations of the West were tangled in their own conflicts, like the 100 Years' War. Promises were made, but in the end, no significant help would arrive. Constantinople and its emperor were left to face their destiny alone. And across the Bosphorus Strait, a new power was rising, embodied in one ambitious young man. In 1451, Sultan Murad II died, and his 21-year-old son Mehmed took the Ottoman throne. Western courts dismissed him as young and inexperienced, a foolish miscalculation they would bitterly regret. Mehmed II was brilliant, ruthless, and possessed by a single all-consuming obsession: the conquest of Constantinople. The city was more than a strategic prize, it was a symbol. Capturing it would cement his legacy, fulfill a prophecy in the Muslim world, and declare the absolute supremacy of his empire. History would come to know him as Mehmed the Conqueror, and his gaze was fixed firmly on Constantine's city. Mehmed didn't waste a moment. His intentions became terrifyingly clear in 1452, when he ordered the construction of a massive fortress on the European side of the Bosphorus. This new fortress, Rumeli Hisari, or Fortress of Europe, was built in just a few months. Its purpose was undeniable: to cut Constantinople off from any potential aid from the Black Sea. The strait, the city's lifeline, was now an Ottoman lake. The trap was being set. But Mehmed's real trump card was something that would change warfare forever: gunpowder. He hired a brilliant but mercenary Hungarian cannon founder named Urban. Urban had actually offered his services to Constantine first, but the impoverished emperor couldn't afford his steep price. Mehmed, flush with the resources of a rising empire, paid him handsomely and gave him a single momentous task: build cannons powerful enough to shatter the walls of Constantinople. The result was a terrifying marvel of military engineering. Urban produced a series of massive bombards, the most famous being a bronze monster nearly 27 feet long that could hurl a 600-pound stone ball over a mile. In March of 1453, these colossal weapons began their slow journey, dragged by teams of oxen toward the city walls they were built to destroy. Inside Constantinople, the mood was a mix of grim determination and rising panic. Constantine II did everything he could to prepare. He organized the meager defense force he had, about 5,000 Byzantine troops and 2,000 foreign volunteers. This tiny army was all that stood between the Ottoman hordes in the city. Their only real hope lay in the legendary Theodosian Walls. For over 1,000 years, this triple line of fortifications had repelled countless invaders. They were the most formidable defensive system in the world, but they were built for an age of swords and catapults, not for the thunderous rage of superguns. A crucial figure arrived in January 1453, a Genoese soldier of fortune named Giovanni Giustiniani Longo. An expert in siege warfare, he came not for money but for glory, bringing 700 heavily armed soldiers at his own expense. Constantine immediately recognized his value and made him commander of the land defenses. Giustiniani's energy was infectious. He organized the defenders, directed the reinforcement of the walls, and became the backbone of the city's resistance. On April 2nd, 1453, Emperor Constantine ordered the city gates sealed. A great iron chain was stretched across the mouth of the city's harbor, the Golden Horn, to block the Ottoman fleet. The city was now locked down. There would be no retreat. 4 days later, on April 6, the Ottoman vanguard arrived and the final siege of Constantinople began. For 53 agonizing days, the city endured a living hell. The Ottoman bombardment was relentless. From sunrise to sunset, Mehmed's cannons, including Urban's monsters, pounded the ancient Theodosian Walls. The noise was deafening, a constant earth-shattering roar that frayed every nerve. The psychological impact was as devastating as the physical damage, and yet the defenders fought back with incredible tenacity. Under Giustiniani's expert direction, they performed daily miracles. As soon as the cannons went silent at dusk, citizens, men, women, and children would swarm the walls, working through the night with wood, rubble, and earth to patch the breaches. Their defiance was extraordinary. The very walls that had protected their ancestors for a millennium crumbled under the force of gunpowder, and still, they held on. Mehmed's plan was to blockade the city, battering its land walls while his fleet controlled the sea. But the great chain across the Golden Horn was a major problem, preventing his ships from attacking the city's weaker sea walls. Then, in a moment of high drama, a small squadron of Genoese ships loaded with vital supplies fought its way through the entire Ottoman fleet in a spectacular naval battle, slipping past the blockade to the cheers of the desperate citizens on the walls. It was a stunning victory, but it wouldn't be enough. Frustrated, Mehmed conceived one of the most audacious tactical maneuvers in military history. He decided to go around the chain. On his orders, engineers built a massive greased wooden ramp over the landmass of Galata. On the morning of April 22nd, the defenders awoke to an unbelievable sight. Dozens of Ottoman warships were being hauled overland by teams of men and oxen, up a hill and down into the waters of the Golden Horn. The psychological blow was immense. The harbor, their once safe flank, was now compromised. The defenders were stretched even thinner, forced to man the weaker sea walls. The ring of iron was closing. As the weeks dragged on, things grew more desperate. Food was scarce, the soldiers were exhausted, and the constant bombardment was taking its toll. Yet morale held, thanks largely to the leadership of the emperor and Justiniani. Constantine was a constant presence on the walls, fighting alongside his men, sharing their risks and raising their spirits with his own unshakable courage. He was the living embodiment of their defiance. In late May, Mehmed II made a final offer of surrender. He offered Constantine safe passage for himself and his court, and for any citizen who wished to leave with their possessions. He even offered Constantine rule over a small territory as an Ottoman vassal. It was a chance to live. Constantine's reply would echo through history. He politely refused to abandon the city, stating that his subjects had already made their choice. They would die defending their homes. As to surrendering the city to you, it is not for me to decide, or for any of its citizens, for we have all decided by our own free will to die, and we shall not consider our own lives. The choice was made. There would be no surrender. There would only be the end. The days leading up to the attack were filled with a sense of doom. A strange, thick fog descended upon the city, unheard of in late May. A few nights later, witnesses reported seeing an eerie red glow hovering over the dome of the Hagia Sophia, the great cathedral at the heart of Orthodox Christianity. To the terrified defenders, it seemed as if the Holy Spirit itself was abandoning them. On the night of May 28th, knowing the end was near, Constantine II led a solemn procession through the city's darkened streets. A final unifying Christian service was held in the Hagia Sophia. In a moment of profound tragic unity, Orthodox Greeks and Catholic Latins, divided by centuries of bitter disputes, put their differences aside and prayed together. The emperor received Holy Communion, bidding farewell to his commanders and his people. A final heart-wrenching plea for mercy before the storm. Shortly after midnight on May 29, 1453, the final assault began. A terrifying roar erupted from the Ottoman camp as tens of thousands of soldiers charged the walls, their war cries mixing with the thunder of drums and trumpets. Mehmed's plan was methodical and brutal: send wave after wave of soldiers to wear down the exhausted defenders until they finally broke. The first wave, irregular troops known as Bashi Bazouks, were driven forward with whips and promises of plunder. They fought fiercely but were repulsed. The second wave, better equipped Anatolian troops followed, concentrating their attack on the most damaged section of the walls. The fighting was savage, hand-to-hand combat in the rubble. For hours the small Christian force held its ground. Then at a critical moment, disaster struck. Giovanni Giustiniani, the hero who had been the soul of the defense, was gravely wounded. The accounts differ on whether it was an arrow or a cannon fragment, but he collapsed in agony. In immense pain, he asked to be taken off the front line. His men carried him away through a small gate, shattering the morale of the remaining defenders. Panic began to spread. At that very moment, a group of Ottoman janissaries, the Sultan's elite, noticed a small gate. A postern had been left open. They poured through, seized a nearby tower, and raised the Ottoman banner. The end came with terrifying speed. Seeing the Ottoman flags on the walls and with their lines faltering after Justiniani's fall, the defense collapsed. Ottoman soldiers surged through the breaches and opened gates, overwhelming the last pockets of resistance. And here, according to the accounts that have echoed through history, Constantine XI performed his final legendary act. Seeing that all was lost, he could have tried to escape. Instead, he reportedly cast off his purple imperial regalia, the symbols of his office, so he might die as a simple soldier among his men. With a final cry of, "The city has fallen and I am still alive," he drew his sword and, with his few remaining comrades, led a final hopeless charge into the sea of invading enemies. He was never seen again. He was killed in the chaos of the final moments, fighting for the city he refused to abandon. His body was never definitively identified. The last Roman emperor died anonymously, falling with his city just as he had promised. The fall of Constantinople was more than the end of a siege. It was the end of an era. It marked the definitive death of the Byzantine Empire and the final end of a Roman imperial tradition that had lasted for nearly 1,500 years. The city that was once the jewel of Christendom was transformed. Mehmed the Conqueror made it the new capital of his burgeoning Ottoman Empire, and the great cathedral of Hagia Sophia was converted into a mosque. The city became Istanbul. The event sent shockwaves across the world. It altered the balance of power, clearing the way for unchecked Ottoman expansion into Europe. Paradoxically, it also helped fuel the Renaissance, as Greek scholars fled the fallen city, carrying with them the priceless knowledge of the ancient world to the west. But beyond the grand sweep of history, the story endures because of the man at its center, Constantine XI. Palaiologos has become a figure of legend. In Greek folklore, he isn't dead. He is the Marmaromenos Decidius, the marble emperor, sleeping in a hidden cave, waiting for an angel to awaken him and reclaim his city. This legend speaks to a deeper truth: Constantine's choice to stand and fight against impossible odds, to sacrifice himself for his people and his heritage, transformed a crushing defeat into an immortal symbol of heroic defiance. His last stand wasn't just the end of an empire, it was a testament to the enduring power of courage, duty, and the refusal to surrender what defines us, even in the face of certain death. He may have lost an empire, but in doing so, he secured a legend that will never be forgotten. If you found this story of heroism and tragedy compelling, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next journey into the most epic stories from history. Thanks for watching.